Hello everyone, this is Colin Goebel. In this video tutorial, I will demonstrate how to build your first game in GameMaker, Catch the Clown. If you look at the web page for this learning module, you'll see a link for Catch the Clown. If we click on this link here, Game 1 Catch the Clown, you'll download a PDF file, which is the instructions for creating the game. I'll click on that now and you can see what happens. We're downloading an application here and what you see is a tutorial for your first game. So what I'm going to do in this video tutorial is step you through the steps for making your first game, which you can use to supplement the tutorial or to explain any steps that you have trouble following. Okay, I'll close that tutorial now. And actually I have another window here that I'll just get rid of. As we make the game, we're going to need some images and some sounds and various other components collectively known as assets. If we click this link, download here, we'll be able to download from the website a file that contains all the assets that we're going to need for this game. So I'm going to save that file. In my case, it gets saved into a folder called temp on my hard drive. You may download into some other place. That's how I happen to have my web browser configured. And you'll see we have a zip file here of roughly a megabyte. Let's unzip that. So I'm going to extract to here. And we'll see that I get another copy of that PDF, which are, once again, the instructions for building the game. But what we're interested in here in the temp folder is a subfolder called example, in which we see a copy of the game Catch the Clown. That's the finished version of the game from the tutorial. But what we're interested in at this point are the resources, background images, some sound effects, some music, and a couple of images for our wall and the clown. Okay, let's start GameMaker, and we'll launch it here. We'll continue using the light edition. We don't need the professional edition for any of the exercises in this class. So we'll launch a new version of GameMaker. And here it is, new game, GameMaker 8.0 Lite. Now to keep things simple, I'll point out that on the File menu, we have an Advanced mode which we can turn on or off. I think the instructions for the first example tell you to turn off Advanced mode, but for most of this term we're going to want to leave the GameMaker software in Advanced mode, so for the purposes of this demonstration, I'll leave Advanced mode turned on. If you want to see the images just like the ones in the demo, in the PDF, you can just turn that off if you prefer, and you'll notice that some of the folders get removed. But anyway, I'll turn Advanced mode back on for this tutorial, and let's get started. Okay, the first thing we're going to need for our demo is a room. A room is basically a level. Let's create a room. I'm going to right-click on the room object as I did, and by default my room is called Room 0. Not sure that's a particularly good name for a room, so I'll right-click on that again. Let's rename it, and let's call it Level 1, say. Ultimately, in a bigger game, of course, we could have lots of different rooms called Level 1, Level 2, and so on and so forth, but for the purposes of this demonstration, we'll only have one. Let's call it Level 1. Okay, now in this room, we're going to need some sprites. Sprites are graphical representations of objects in the game. Let's create a sprite. And since this game is called Catch the Clown, the first sprite we're going to need, let's give it a name instead of Sprite 0. I will rename it SPR_CLOWN, SPR Clown. So my graphical image is going to be called SPR Clown, as you can see. And now what we have to do is produce the graphical image. Well, we don't have it on in a file. What we want to do is load it. So I'm going to click the Load Sprite button. And in this particular case, you may remember I downloaded my resources into the temp folder. In example, under resources, we have a few images, but the one that I'm looking for in that resources folder that we downloaded a short while ago was an image called clown.bmp. And that's in fact the one that we want. So I'm going to select that, and you'll notice that there's our picture of our clown sprite. Okay. Now, as we do note the game, well, we'll just leave it at that for right now. So I'm going to click on OK here. Before I do that, let's just notice that the width of this clown sprite is 32 pixels and the height is 32 pixels. So let's click on OK, and we'll notice that we have in our sprite folder a sprite representing the clown. Okay, let's also create a sprite for the wall that's going to delimit the edge of the room. Let's call this SPR underbar wall. Let's load that sprite. Once again, it's in the resources folder. Let's load it up, wall.bmp. So we'll open that. And in this particular case, we'll do exactly the same thing. We'll note that it has a width of 32 and a height of 32. And I'll once again click on OK. So we have two sprites, a clown sprite and a wall sprite, which are graphical images of objects. To go with each of those, we'll create the object themselves. So again, we'll right-click on objects. I'm going to create an object. Let's call this obj clown for the clown object. And let's indicate the sprite that's associated with the clown object. So let's click that little button right there. And instead of no sprite, let's associate the clown sprite with the clown object. Of course, we want the clown to be visible, so we'll leave the visible box checked. I'm just going to click on OK at this point. So we have a clown object. As you might imagine, the next thing we need to do here is create another object. The object in this case is going to be the wall object. I'm going to create the wall object. We'll associate that with the wall sprite like that. We'll make the wall sprite visible because we'll want the user to see the walls, although objects don't have to be visible. We can have invisible objects in GameMaker. And this time I'm going to click on Solid. And the purpose of the Solid button is GameMaker has an automatic mechanism for making sure that two objects don't overlap each other, or in this case, that our clown object doesn't appear to pass through the wall. So in that sense, we want the wall to be solid because we don't want other objects overlapping it or passing through it. Okay, we'll click on OK, and we have a clown object, a wall object, and with them there we have associated sprites. Now you may ask, why do we need sprites and objects? And the answer is because as a game proceeds, an object might have many different sprites associated with it. For example, if the object is Mario, and Mario is walking right, the sprite will be an animated sprite of some sort, showing Mario walking in the right-hand direction. On the other hand, if Mario is walking left, then we have a sprite showing Mario walking left. If we have a power-up, then we may have some other sprite indicating that that particular object is in a powered-up state. So I'm sure you can appreciate that as a game develops, it's very important that the sprites associated with given objects change to indicate the state that that object is in. Okay, let's take our room properties and let's increase it, make our room a little bigger. And you'll notice by default a room is this particular size. Let's look at the settings for the room. We can see that the width of the room is 640 pixels by a height of 480. And we might notice again by default that the room is animated at a speed of 30 frames a second. This is pretty common in gameplay and indicates that the computer is going to update the view of this particular room 30 times per second. Okay, let's go back to objects. We'll notice there's a grid laid over the room here. If you remember, our clown sprite was 32 by 32, and our wall sprite was 32 by 32. And it's often very useful in game design to have all of our sprites to be of the same size. It makes certain aspects of the gameplay work much more smoothly. So I'm going to set the grid to 32 by 32 to match the size of our sprites. And having done that, let's take our wall object and lay it around the side of the room. So the object to add with the left mouse is going to be the wall object, and I'm going to put the wall object in each of the squares on the grid. Now, in fact, if I hold down the Shift key here, I can just drag the mouse across there, and I will get a multiple insertion of the wall object on all of the points of the grid that I roll the mouse over. So that's a quick way to get a wall object like that. So here we have our level. It's been surrounded by a wall object everywhere. Let's add with the left mouse the clown object. Let's put the clown in the middle of the room, and there's our initial design for the game. Having got this far, let's see how the game looks. We're going to click the green arrow to run the game. And we'll look at what we have here. So you'll see here's our game. There's our clown object. There's absolutely no movement going on, but at least we see the level as we designed it. Okay, let's close that. Let's go back into design mode, and let's have our clown moving around the room. We'll get to that in the next section of this tutorial.